Clink, clink, clink. That is the sound I still hear when I wake up in the middle of the night, when the house is quiet, when I think I have finally forgotten. A spoon against an enamel mug, soft and steady.
That night in the abandoned hospital, I understood one thing. The dead do not want water. They want you to come closer. My name is Elizabeth Grant. Everyone calls me Liz. I am 63 years old. I worked as a nurse for over 40 years, and I never believed in ghosts. Until that night. That hospital was built in the 1940s. St. Jude's Sanatorium, a tuberculosis hospital in Louisiana, 30 kilometers from Baton Rouge. A long gray building among oaks draped with Spanish moss, white corridors, the smell of chlorine, quiet coughing voices behind closed doors. I worked there from the age of 18. Night shifts, morning rounds, thousands of patients over 40 years. The hospital closed 20 years ago. New treatment methods, new regulations, no funding. The building was simply abandoned, with everything inside, with all the secrets inside. That autumn, I ran into trouble with my pension. It sounds ordinary, but for me, it was a catastrophe. 4 years of my work were recorded nowhere. The documents had been lost. The Social Security office just shrugged. Without those 4 years, my pension would be next to nothing. So I needed documents, and the documents were only in one place, in that same abandoned hospital, in its archive. There was little hope that anything had survived in that hospital, but I took the chance. So one morning, I opened an old address book and found a phone number, and called Otis B. Otis Brown. My old friend, former facilities manager at the sanatorium. Now he lived near the ruins, guarding them from scavengers. We hadn't spoken in about 5 years. After the 4th ring, a familiar voice answered, old, a little hoarse, but just as kind as ever. Lizzie, is that really you? I smiled. Hello, Otis. Lord, how many years has it been? A very long time. What can I do for you? I explained the situation, about the pension, about the missing documents, about 4 years of work history. Otis listened in silence. Then he chuckled. You know what's the funny thing? What? The archive is still right where it used to be. You're joking. No. After all these years, the cabinets are standing just like they were. The roof leaks, the windows are broken, plenty of rats, but the archive is still there. I was quiet for a moment. So the documents might still be there? Most likely. And you can let me in? Of course. Then his voice grew more serious. Just come during the day. Why? A short pause. Just come during the day. I didn't like the way he said that, but I didn't ask any more questions. I stared at the phone for a long time after I hung up. Then the memories came flooding back, especially the memory of one particular story we used to tell each other on the night shifts when the wind howled outside and the lights in the corridors went out. The story about the 31st Ward. And right then, I very much did not want to go there. I went anyway. The morning bus to the highway, then on foot along a dirt road. An hour's walk. Louisiana autumn. Gray sky, wet leaves, Spanish moss hanging from the oaks like old curtains. The smell of the swamp, of rotting leaves, of something damp and heavy. The overgrowth grew thicker. The asphalt had cracked. The road sign had long since fallen into a ditch. But the hospital was still standing. I saw it from far away, an enormous gray building among the trees. Empty windows staring out at the world like dark eye sockets. Rusty gates, an overgrown path, broken benches in an old park, and the building itself, gray, peeling, part of the roof had caved in. Just the sight of it sent a chill down my spine. Too many memories were tied to this place. Too many people had died here.
Otis was standing at the entrance, older, hair completely white, but his eyes were the same, alive, with laugh lines at the corners. We embraced. We walked slowly toward the entrance. Along the way, we talked about old times, night shifts, patients, funny moments, colleagues. For a few minutes, I almost felt like nothing had changed. "Remember," he said, "when we were playing cards in the nurses' station? The chief doctor almost caught us, and you stuffed the cards under your uniform. And do you remember?" I laughed. "How you used to bring me cookies for the night shifts?" We stood there laughing, but the laughter faded quickly, because in front of us was that building, and it bore down on you. We went inside. Otis stayed in the lobby. He had a post to keep, he was on duty, and I went to the archive alone. Along the way, he remembered the story about the elevator, the freight elevator, the one they used to transport seriously ill patients to the operating room. Otis spoke briefly, in a low voice. Many years ago, a critically ill patient was being taken for emergency surgery. He was loaded into the freight elevator, but the mechanism jammed between floors. The elevator stopped. The doctors could not open the doors. The technicians were called too late. When the cab was finally forced open, the patient was already dead. They say that after that, the elevator sometimes stopped on its own, on the second floor. The doors would open, and a tall man in a gray hospital gown would be standing inside, and he would say, "Help me, I have to get to surgery." During the day, people laughed about it, but at night, the staff preferred to use the stairs. Otis gave a quiet snort. "Funny thing." "What exactly?" "They dismantled the elevator a long time ago. And? But the doors still open sometimes." I looked at him. He wasn't smiling. I listened and said nothing. Because I was thinking about something else. A worse story. "You still haven't told me about the 31st ward," I said. Otis stopped at the staircase, looked up. The plans called for 30 wards on each floor. It was more convenient that way. Accounting, record keeping. But in the right wing of the second floor, the architect made some kind of mistake. An extra one appeared, the 31st. They didn't want to redo it, so they just drew new plans, as if it didn't exist. "And then there was a fire," I said. "Yes. The right wing burned. All the patients were evacuated. The reports said everyone. But the old orderlies used to whisper that they forgot one person. A bedridden old man. He couldn't stand up on his own. He couldn't get out. He burned." Otis was quiet for a moment. "To avoid a scandal, the ward was bricked up. Since then, it doesn't appear on any plans, not in any documents, not in anyone's memory. Only sometimes at night you can hear knocking from that wall." We went inside. The smell hit immediately. Damp, mold, old plaster, rotting wood. The corridors were sunk in half-darkness. Rays of sunlight filtered through the broken windows. Dust swirled in the air. I looked slowly around me. Every step echoed. Too quiet, too empty, too familiar. "The archive is at the end of the corridor," said Otis. "I remember. I'll be downstairs." "All right." He paused, then added, "If you hear anything strange, just leave." "Like what?" Otis looked away. "Anything." I didn't like his tone, not one bit. The archive was on the ground floor, in the left wing. The smell in there was heavy. Mold, old paper, chlorine that hadn't been used in 20 years but seemed to have soaked into the walls forever. I found the right cabinets. The folders were in relatively good order. Mice had damaged some things, but most of it had survived. I was looking for my employment orders, payroll ledgers, anything that could confirm 4 years of work. I found almost everything. My hands were trembling slightly, from anxiety, from the stale air, from this wretched building all around me. Then a journal fell out of one of the folders. Old, brown cover, a night duty logbook. I picked it up automatically, opened it to put it back, and stopped. The journal had fallen open to the right page on its own, or not on its own. I don't know. The pages were filled with different handwriting, different inks, different people, but the entries repeated themselves over and over, as if someone had been recording the same thing for years. Ward 31. Knocking. Voice heard. Asking for water. Do not respond. Do not enter. I flipped through several pages at once, almost a decade of entries, and it kept repeating, again and again. In one place, a note. In 1987, the wall was bricked up. I turned the page, and there was a loose sheet, separate, burned along the edges. Patient's name, Joseph Walker. Date of the Ashen Fire. Ward number, 31. I stared at that sheet for a long time. Then I put it in my bag, with my documents. I still don't know why. And then I heard a knock. Clink, clink, clink. From above. From the right wing. I froze. A steady, soft ringing. A spoon against a mug. Exactly that. Not a knock, but a ring. Almost musical. I tried to convince myself. Otis, that's Otis going up to check the floors. He dropped something. Or a draft. Or rats. There are plenty of rats here. He said so himself. Otis? I called. Silence. Otis! Silence. Then again. Clink, clink, clink. I gathered my papers and walked to the lobby, quickly, almost running. There was no one in the lobby. Otis's little desk, half-finished coffee, his jacket on the back of the chair, a flashlight, everything in place, only no Otis. I called his name several times. I walked through as much of the ground floor as I dared. Nobody. For a moment, I stood perfectly still. My mind offered a simple solution. Leave, right now. Otis is a grown man. Maybe he stepped outside. Maybe he went to his car. Maybe he went to check the generator, or the old storage room. For that, there was no need at all to go upstairs. But there was a problem. For 40 years, I had worked as a nurse. Over those years, one thought had burned itself into my mind. If a person needs help, you cannot simply turn around and walk away. You will regret it for the rest of your life. I looked again at the empty desk, at the little cup of coffee, at the jacket, at the set of keys. Something was wrong. Very wrong. From upstairs came that familiar ringing again. Clink, 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 as though someone was patiently waiting. I took a slow breath, slung the bag over my shoulder, and headed for the staircase. The steps creaked miserably under my feet. With each step, it grew darker. Sunlight barely reached up here. The second floor met me with the smell of damp and complete silence. The kind of silence that exists only in very old buildings or in cemeteries. The corridor stretched far ahead. Ward doors lined up one after another. Some were open, some had been torn off their hinges, some still held on with rusty locks. I called Otis again. No answer came. Only an echo, and nothing more. So I walked forward, slowly, listening to every sound. To the right ran the right wing. That very wing. I remembered it perfectly well from my working years. Once, the most critical patients had lain here. Now there were only empty rooms and dust. My heart gave an uneasy lurch. Otis! The shout came out louder than I expected. There was no answer. I quickened my pace, then a little more. The corridors seemed unwilling to end. At last, I reached the final section of the wing and stopped. Before me were the doors. 27th Ward, 28th, 29th, 30th. I looked further ahead and frowned. Because beyond that, there was nothing. Only a wall. An ordinary brick wall. Old. Cracked. With peeling plaster. That was exactly how it was supposed to look. Because ward number 31 did not exist. Officially, at least. I was already turning to leave when I heard a sound, very close, on the other side of the wall. Clink. The breath caught in my throat. The sound was so close, it was as if someone stood just a few steps away. Clink, clink. I slowly walked up to the wall, reached out my hand. The brick was ice cold. So cold that my fingers went numb immediately. Strange. The building was warm and stuffy. The air was heavy and damp. But this section of wall felt like a block of ice. I ran my palm across the bricks and suddenly felt a hollow space, as if part of the wall was not real, as if something was hidden behind it. I wanted to leave right then, to turn around, go downstairs, leave the hospital. But curiosity was stronger. I carefully pressed on the wall, a quiet creak, then another. And then part of the brickwork slowly gave way inward. I froze, not believing my own eyes. Before me, a narrow passage opened up. Dark, dusty, as if no one had touched it for decades. Cold air drifted from inside, and the smell of char, old char, the way a place smells of fire many years after it burned. I stood and stared into the darkness. My heart beat harder and harder. My mind desperately demanded that I leave, but my feet somehow took a step forward, then another. The beam of the flashlight swept across the floor, across the walls, across the crumbled plaster. The passage turned out to be very short, only a few meters. At the far end was a door, an old metal door, blackened, partially burned, with a rusty plate in the middle. I raised the flashlight higher and felt something drop inside me. A number was visible on the plate. Ward number 31 existed. It had existed all this time. And at that moment, a quiet voice came from behind the door. Very faint, very distant, as if spoken by someone who had almost no strength left. "Sister." I froze. The voice came again. "Sister. Water." And somewhere very close, a spoon struck slowly against the rim of a mug. Clink. From behind the door came a whisper, soft, raspy, as if through a dry throat. "Sister, help me. Water." I stood there and did not move. I remembered the words of the head nurse. She had worked in this hospital before me. She died long ago, but I remembered her words. "Liz," she used to say, "if a dead person asks for water, don't give it. They don't want to drink. They want you to come closer." But the whisper behind the door was so faint, so human. "Sister, please, I am a nurse." I turned the handle. The handle was ice cold, so cold that my fingers went numb at once. But it turned. The door opened inward. A small room, no windows, more like a cell. One bed against the wall, a chair and a nightstand. On the bed, a person under a sheet. I stood in the doorway. The flashlight shone straight at the bed. Someone was lying on the bed. The person was completely covered by a white sheet, motionless. I stopped. My heart pounded so hard that the rush of blood drowned out all other sounds. "Otis?" There was no answer, only silence. Then came a faint rustle. Very slowly, the figure beneath the sheet began to move. I froze. The person sat up on the bed. The sheet fell away. I did not scream because there was no air. The air simply vanished. For a moment, I felt as though I had stopped breathing. The skin was black, burned, cracked in places, as if fire had once destroyed it. Almost no lips remained. The cheeks bore terrible burn scars. He stretched his hands toward me. He opened his mouth. I backed away. My back hit the doorframe. And then I saw it. The pitcher on the nightstand. The pitcher of water was right there beside him. Full, clean water. He didn't need water. The head nurse's words struck me like a slap. He doesn't want to drink. He wants you to come closer. I lunged out the door, slammed it shut. From the other side came a roar, not human. Something between a scream and the screech of metal. The door shuddered. Then came a crashing, as if something heavy was hurling itself against the wall. I ran down the corridor without looking back, down the stairs, through the lobby, out the door. I flew out of the building and only stopped beside an old bench. My heart was pounding so hard that everything swam before my eyes. For several seconds, I simply tried to catch my breath. Then I raised my head and froze. Outside, it was morning. Real morning. Bright sunlight already hanging above the trees. Birds calling somewhere in the branches. A light breeze stirring the Spanish moss. I looked around and understood nothing. When I had gone up to the second floor, it was only just getting dark. Maybe 30 minutes had passed, perhaps 40, but not an entire night. Lizzie! I spun around. Otis was standing near the guardhouse, and he looked as though he had seen a ghost. He stared at me with wide eyes for several long seconds. What happened? I finally asked, but instead of answering, he slowly shook his head, as if trying to understand whether he was really seeing me or not. Lord, that was all he said. Otis, what is going on? He came closer, as if afraid I would vanish before his eyes. Lizzie, where did you just come from? From the hospital. He went pale. What is it? But you already came out of there yesterday. Everything dropped inside me. What? Yesterday evening, I saw you. You came out through the main entrance, walked down the path. I even called out to you. You didn't answer? I frowned. Otis, I was inside that whole time. He looked at me in silence, then waved his hand decisively. Come with me. We went over to his desk. Otis turned on the computer, clicked the mouse a few times. A camera feed appeared on the screen. Date, time, the hospital entrance. I saw myself. First, the recording showed me entering the building during the day. Then Otis fast-forwarded the footage. Evening fell. The sun had nearly set. And then I saw a woman. Myself. She came out of the hospital doors and walked along the path toward the gates. I felt my hands go cold. It was me, my clothes, my hair, my walk, all mine. The woman in the recording didn't even glance toward the camera. She simply left. A few seconds later, she disappeared among the trees. Otis stopped the recording. Silence hung in the room. Now do you understand why I thought you had gone? I didn't answer, because at that moment, movement appeared on the screen again. Otis brought up another recording, the morning one, today's, and I saw myself one more time. This time, I was running out of the hospital, frightened, disheveled, exactly as I had been a few minutes ago. So it seemed that yesterday evening, one Elizabeth Grant had left the building, and in the morning, a different one had walked out. At home, I emptied my bag onto the table. My documents, employment order, payroll ledgers, personal file, everything was there. And the burned sheet. I had taken it. I remembered taking it. I had placed it with the documents in the archive. But now the letters on it were sharper, clearer than they had been in the archive.
as if they had surfaced overnight. Joseph Walker, date of death, exactly the day of the fire, Ward 31. I sat over that sheet for a long time. I thought about the person who had been forgotten, who had been bricked up, first in the wall, then in the documents, then in memory. A patient, a bedridden old man. He could not get out on his own, and no one in all those decades had remembered his name. The next day, I went to a church, a Catholic one on our street. I don't go regularly, just when I have to, when something calls me there. This time it called me. The church was almost empty, only one elderly woman near the candles, gray-haired and small. She looked at me and asked, "Who are you grieving for, dear?" "A patient," I said. He was forgotten. No one said a prayer for him. No one even lit a candle. She nodded. Slowly, as if this didn't surprise her at all. "You did right to come. All souls need peace, and the living, forgiveness." I bought a candle, walked up to the altar, lit it. I stared at the flame and thought, Joseph Walker, I remember you. Even if no one else does, I remember. May you rest in peace. When I walked out of the church, my soul felt lighter. Not good, not joyful, just lighter. As if something that had been pressing on me from inside all night had finally let go. I received my pension. It had been worth making that trip to the hospital. But every autumn, I go back there. I don't go inside. I just stand at the gates. I look at the gray building among the oaks, at the Spanish moss, at the caved-in roof of the right wing. And I pray for those who remained inside the walls. My whole life I cared for the sick. I thought the most important things were giving the medication on time, giving injections, not missing a fever, not mixing up an IV. It turned out the most important thing is something else. Not forgetting the one you couldn't save. A name. That is what remains of us. Not a ward, not a number in a logbook, not a line in a report. A name. And whoever remembers the name saves that person a second time. Joseph Walker. Now you know that name too.